Happy Wednesday, everyone. Great to see everyone, although I physically can't see you, but it is good to be in contact. Getting back into full swing after being away in Ireland and a bit of a move. I'm back in Calgary, by the way, as well, for those of you that don't know. Did a big move for a couple of reasons. A, I love what Alberta is doing. I love that they have a government that is focused on resources. They are focused on the transition. They see the opportunity that Canada has, and they're doing their best to try to make it happen. Of course, the political lines are drawn between those progressives who don't understand energy or the green revolution or climate change, compared to those that actually understand that if you want to do a transition, it involves transitioning something, and two, developing mining assets to be able to get the critical metals for any of the solutions. And having that conversation with people is extremely challenging. I rarely look at comments on videos or other people's content that isn't in our space. Like, I like to obviously watch other newsletter writers and bloggers that are have wonderful insights into our space. But sometimes we're kind of like talking to each other, really. We've attracted the crowd that understands. And the problem is that when you go and look at some left-wing propaganda about why you shouldn't have the resolution mine, you'll quickly realize the level of thought and understanding that people have when they're producing these types of pieces is it's almost none. Why would you? I mean, if you are a left-wing environmentalist who hates finance and isn't into economics, certainly isn't into mining or engineering, how would you understand how global markets works, or how would you even know that logistically you have to get copper to a smelter and then it has to go to produce all the electric wires? They don't know. They just don't. And that is the big difference between when we see a lot of content out there, or a Netflix special, that most of it, although enjoyable, and believe me, I was a big fan of watching movies and content and Netflix growing up and whatnot, is garbage. It's terrible. It's not any even academic level work or even insightful analytical work. And unfortunately, that's where most people get their information. And that is challenging. But this isn't about whining, complaining about all of that. It's just to let you know, hey, I'm in Calgary and we're doing exciting, interesting things here. And, we look at not only spot markets, but we've been talking to groups about physical delivery of commodities. And that is quite an interesting discussion, especially since the equities are troubled right now. And no one wants to invest, or it's very little amount invested in Canada to develop all of these assets that we desperately need. Now, that might change. I've kind of praised Pierre Poilievre in regards to his take, not only in the Ring of Fire, but helping to develop some of these assets. And Carney's come out the same. And he said, oh, no, we're open to not duplicate. And I have to give credit because, once again, at this point, it's just people's words. And I don't put a lot of credit on just words. But at least if they're acknowledging that there is a duplicate process in permitting, there's lots of federal obstruction involved, then at least he said it, that he's open to it. I don't believe him at all, because he really is the person who mastered the entire last 9 years for Justin and the Liberal Party. I don't think they're going to do anything in regards to any kind of energy transition or change. But if he happens to win and he does change things and he's open-minded, I'd be pleasantly surprised. But I don't have any background as to whether or not Pierre Poilievre would be true in holding to his word that he wants to develop these or not. I have no idea. I just know that we've got plenty of experience and knowledge of Carney's actual decisions and his plans, and they are not that. It's the plans we've seen for the last 9 years. So if you want more of that, you know how to vote. Nothing's going to change if you don't change it. But we're going to talk about copper. And copper has been on a roll, and it's impressive where it's gone. If you are into physical commodities, you've had the time of your life, despite how challenging equities have been, the chaos out there and social, all over the place. You've done well. And some people, I know the copper pulled back quite a bit. I think it's at 448 right now. But it almost hit it was at 540, I think, yesterday, or 530. At one point, it ticked up, or the day before. I mean, that's and that was Costas Bintas over at Trafigura Group. He kind of said, listen, it could hit $12,000 a ton, or roughly 554. It didn't quite, but it almost did. So yeah, it could be stretched to go, do another swing back up here soon. I assume a lot of traders here took a ton of profit. If you're in a forward exchange, or you're in the commodities market where you're leveraged, and this kind of movement, you've either made a ton of money, like an exceptional amount, or you've lost an exceptional amount. But upon this, there's a number of issues that he brought up, and he quoted as saying China has been successful historically in rejecting high prices. He said this is the first time in recent history that another market, being the U.S., is taking tons away from the Chinese market, and this is uncharted territory. And that's very interesting to see. And this is a direct result of the U.S. push and the implementation of saying, whether you like it or not, we're going to start developing at home. We're going to start manufacturing at home. We're implementing these tariffs because we want people to invest in the U.S. And listen, we're not here to discuss that strategy. Everyone has an opinion on it. Once again, 95% aren't really worth much unless you're looking at someone who actually is an analyst, who's actually in finance or high level execution of trade. Otherwise, an opinion isn't really worth much. And I do like to read comments sometimes just to get a sense of how out of touch most people, the general public, are. And it's incredible how media works. I mean, people will just blindly follow something CBC says and not give it a second thought critically as to how our own system works, never mind how trading with a foreign partner works. And that's just, I guess that's the good thing about social media is you get to share a lot of, and I get to share my thoughts. The downside is everyone has an opinion, and that's a problem. I think there should be a little bit more reserve to people, kind of like, say, you're back in high school and you start shouting answers that are completely wrong and you kind of feel shamed for it. There has to be a little bit more of that because everyone feels that they have a right to an opinion, even though it's nothing that they even understand. And that I find very interesting psychologically. Anyways, I'm digressing again regarding copper, but Jeff Currie, this is a name we've talked about a number of times because he used to be at Goldman Sachs, huge copper bull. He's now Chief Strategy Officer over at Energy Pathways, which is part of the Carlyle Group, which is a very big, significant group. And once again, he was the global head of commodities research at Goldman Sachs. He's huge copper bull. He looks at copper as being the new energy. It is the transition material, and it is. It just factually is. If you could argue that it is the critical one for everything, because even if we were to do a massive nuclear play, and I'm not saying that they will. I mean, the U.S. would have to I think start up about 8 nuclear projects a year if they were to even attempt to meet the standards that they discussed at COP28. And I don't see any announcement of 8 projects being started. You could argue that uranium would be another massive fuel source, but even for that, to create a nuclear facility and a reactor, that's a ton of copper. So copper really is the bedrock, and not just for bedrock as in foundations of your buildings, your infrastructure, which Canada needs to do, but the U.S. definitely needs to do. I mean, it's kind of a boring story, but there's so many bridges. This shouldn't be boring, that need to be reworked and redone. That's a lot of steel, a lot of copper, a lot of commodities in order to make bridges up to standard. And that's kind of the boring infrastructure world. Never mind all the cable, all the internet, all the supply that's required for the data centers, for AI. Never mind that we had touched on in a blog article too. If you have any belief in that we might have this robot situation in 3, 4, 5 years, where there'll be 20,000, 100,000, 2 million actual walking robots doing work for us, that is a whole other EV angle of battery packs and copper that you're going to need to have. So what I'm getting at is that there's a huge demand on copper, and he had said back, Jeff Curry, this is in May 24, that he described copper as the best trade of his career. And boy, he must be loving life. Maybe he's the one who sold it over $5 and he's cashed in some. Who knows? That kind of movement, you'd be foolish not to take some money off the table. But I don't think that I would expect, if we watch any news coming out from him moving forward, any interviews, his position is not going to change. This is a global cycle that is going to take decades. Any of these projects aren't short. You can't just simply build a reactor. You can't just simply do infrastructure projects and get them done quickly. I mean, look at, like, say, in Calgary, getting a ring road done. Look at trying to get a bridge done, say, in Vancouver. These are massive projects, and the amount of massive projects that have to get done are incredible. And it's we're seeing a lot of actual physical delivery and intake of copper into the U.S. because a lot of companies are like, listen, we got to get this in there, because if tariffs go in, it's going to be a nightmare. And this is obviously having a huge effect on the markets. And once again, I'm taking no position as to the chaos that is going on because of all this tariff talk. It certainly isn't helpful. That'll be my one comment. Even if you agree with what they're trying to achieve long term, it's very challenging to put a lot of stress and onerous on other countries. Even though, listen, the U.S. said they gave a mandate that they wanted America to be first, and Canada needs the same. And I don't. This isn't a political show, but that should be part of your concern: is who's actually looking out for Canada economically, and who's going to provide them the best opportunity. Because if you're like a new immigrant, you're not exactly happy with what has turned out of the Canadian dream in the last 9 years. There's not opportunity. We need someone to take advantage for those that already live here and those that have come here to say, yes, we want to really ignite this economy, create jobs. Let's focus less on these mega billion-dollar companies that are led by billionaires, and let's focus on medium-sized businesses that can actually hire a lot of people and spread the wealth around, essentially. That, to me, is more interesting. So I've got a couple other people here. So Trafigura Group, Graham Train, he's the head of metals and minerals analysis. He said he acknowledged the potential for copper to reach new highs, but once again, it's a fragile trade, let's just say, because a lot of this he believes is centered around this U.S. tariffs idea. Of course, the long-term play is the overall supply demand, which we've talked about and shown graphs. And once again, if you're in the space, you've seen all the graphs. There's a supply shortage and a demand need that is rapidly approaching us. And what's challenging about that, and this is, whenever I talk to someone new in the space in mining, is it's hard to attract people into the space whenever they go, well, I don't want to do exploration. It's too risky. I want to look at producers. Okay, that's great. I understand that curve. Or I want to look at someone who's about to produce. And if you're the U.S., and in the last 4 years, there were 3, and one in particular, projects declined for copper that could have come online. And once again, this is from a Biden administration that agreed with the critical metal strategy, that had an infrastructure play, that recognized that the U.S. needed copper, and yet they axed in January 22 the Twin Metal Mine in Minnesota, the Ambler Road project in Alaska, but of course the biggest one being Resolution Copper in Arizona. And they didn't stop it, but they basically put it on pause so that there could be a further review of environmental impacts and cultural impacts. And listen, I always say this: you need to involve all stakeholders if they're legitimate and if they're being working in good faith. Those are critical. And then you need to stop and say, are you just stalling projects, or are you just wanting more money? And I know the people who aren't in the space, They don't understand the intricacies of how this works. And if you give one party or one side the ability to stop a project moving forward, whether that's oil and gas or whether that's mining, that's too much power. And that should send a signal to those that are on, say, the left-leaning side that are very focused on E, S, and G, is that if your cultural ideology and your social impact is more important than the climate, so if you actually believe that the climate is the biggest threat to the planet, but yet you're stopping projects because of ideology or because of cultural awareness or well, I don't want to offend people, then you're not serious about the climate. You're just not. There's a big distance there or gap between thought process. And unfortunately, that's what's happening a lot of times, is that projects are being stopped that should be going forward, that could help not just the US, but the West in developing assets that are critically needed. And once again, I'm not stating that you shouldn't be very cognizant and aware of all of your stakeholders. That's done to death. That happens everywhere and at length. That is not the issue as much as a media story would want to pretend. We're talking here, just to give a bit of a sense of, between those three projects, roughly, and this is more of a conservative, 23 billion metric tons of copper. The Resolution mine is about 18.14 billion of that. Like, it's huge, and it's still paused, and it has been for a long time, and it should be developed. Now, there are other ones that have got some movement forward. We actually talked to Highland Copper before. We did an interview with them, which is an interesting play in Michigan. They do have permits, and they're advancing towards production. Very, very interesting one themselves. But listen, that's the big gap here. And we remind people that there's a number of ways to play all of these opportunities. So one is directly the commodities. And if you're that inclined, you can trade. You go in the futures market and trade the actual commodity. That is a specific skill set, let's just say. You can do what, like I'd hinted and mentioned, you can do actual OTC physical delivery of trade between a producer and an end buyer who significantly wants large amounts of physical copper, crude, whatever it is. That's a very opaque, quieter market that is done in a very different way. And of course, there's the equities, and there's the producer equities. And then the ones that we look at are a lot of the explorers. And, where we talk about a lot of these issues regarding mining. But if you're looking at just the exploration, yes, that's the R&D and the more risky side, because you're trying to find the stuff. But the one good thing about it, and the reason why people are attracted to it, is if you find something, there's a very good likelihood that a major is going to buy you out, and they're going to take your asset because it's significant and it's going to be needed, whether it's 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. And that curve of making some money in the equity market, the Lassonde curve, is what people like, because then it is, listen, we found something, there's money to be made. We don't even have the capacity to be able to talk to governments, local, like at a federal level, or foreign governments to influence whether or not we can get a permit to build this thing. Never mind that you have to map that out for 4, 5, 6 years down the road. It's a challenging path, and which is why we're hoping to see this more of a light speed approach in the States that could be done. Absolutely. And you could meet every EPA regulation, every water, every environmental regulation. You can meet all those regulations and light speed projects to get them done. And that's what people, whether or not you like one administration or not, you should all be on board for. Because if you are concerned about climate change and you are concerned about an energy transition, that means we need to be getting this stuff out of the ground. I've said it to death, but hey, I'll keep saying it, because some of you, I'm preaching to the choir as usual. It's just that we're hoping that you share this with other people, especially those that are zealotly against it, because it seems unlikely, but people often work actively against their own self-interest. And we've noticed that, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's remarkable that that's the case, to see people actively working against their own self-interest, largely because they just don't know. And unfortunately, there's so much information There's so much access to information out there for the average person. There's so much misinformation. I mean, you don't need to agree with me or believe in me. We always tell people, if you like what I'm saying, go verify it. In our blogs, we link to everything. We link to a report. We link to this report. We link to say it, Jeff Curry. It's not me saying these things. This is where it's coming from. A lot of news out there, they don't do that. You can't get the link to a report, and that's where I always, doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's a stock analysis, it's a commodity analysis, it's a government policy. If someone just tells you their opinion, they never link to it, they don't read it, or they encourage you not to go read it, that's a problem. Unfortunately, nowadays people get caught in headlines, and they see a headline and they're then critically motivated by, they're offended one way or the other because of it, and they make opinions very quickly. And you have some attractive, nice, smiling, friendly person who says, "Oh, this is why this is happening. Seems reasonable," and they're fine with it. And it's very telling of our times, the amount of opinions and strong opinions people have on issues that they've never studied, and it's very curious, to say the least. I've always been terrified to have too strong opinions on something unless I've done a lot of work. But that doesn't seem to be the case nowadays. In any event, there's lots of opportunity out there. Sooner or later, it's going to hit the equities as well. And sooner or later, I think people are just waiting to see, how's this Canadian election going to go? What's going to happen with the US? Because that's not clearing up until we see who's winning. Whoever wins Canada, that's either going to be a hammer comes down on us, or maybe there's room to discuss. Then it'll be, what's the actual plan? And it'll be what's being rolled out, because we hear some good news, we hear some positive stuff. I think it's very obvious that change is needed, like on a very large front. And I just mean, leave all the politics, all the social, all that, leave that alone. Just economically speaking, financially speaking, there has to be change. Otherwise, we're in trouble. And hopefully that's coming. Anyways, everyone, even if there is trouble coming, there's tons of money to be made. You see it. Gold's doing great. Copper's been shooting up. There's opportunities out there. And that's what we want to remind people, is that there's a lot of noise out there. It's easy to get offended and get pissed off. I do all the time. And I have to shake my head, let it roll off my back and go, listen, you're wasting too much energy on this. This is a waste of time. Go focus on the positive, where things could go, and where my best energy and efforts are put. That's all part of the mindset, of the market mindset. It's as valuable as anything else. If you have a model and you have a mindset to keep on focus and be disciplined, you've got a way better shot than being pulled this way and that way by a headline, or by an opinion, or by a lot of this terrible noise that's out there to distract people from the real issues that are out there. And everyone knows the real issues. So let's focus in on them and then find the opportunities to combat those real issues. Anyways, that's my rant for the day. I thought I wouldn't do 30 minutes, but I almost did it again. I'll let you all go. Keep sending me information. I love it. I love your feedback, and I love the opinions you guys have as well. And if you get a chance, sign up, share with other people. We want people to that are going to be challenged and even annoyed by what I say, because that's how you start having conversations. And that's the main important thing, is we have to have all sides, all stakeholders sharing ideas in good faith again, in order to make this work. And if we can get there sooner or later, that would be best. All the best, everyone. Take care. And thanks for listening.